What just happened at the Supreme Court is huge, yet barely anyone is talking about it. An 8-1 emergency ruling just dropped that could completely reshape Second Amendment battles across the United States. And here's the twist. This isn't a straightforward win or loss. It's far more complex and could have major implications for your gun rights. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what this ruling means for you and your Second Amendment freedoms. So, let's get into it. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed and double-check your subscription. YouTube has a habit of unsubscribing people from channels like mine. If this content matters to you, hit that like button too. The Supreme Court recently denied an emergency review in one of the most critical Second Amendment cases you probably haven't heard of. This involves something called a SAPA law, or Second Amendment Preservation Act. What's a SAPA law? Simply put, it's when a state says, we're not going to help the federal government enforce gun laws that we believe violate the Second Amendment. This matters because federal agencies rely heavily on state and local law enforcement to implement federal laws. They don't have the manpower to do it all themselves. When a state refuses to cooperate, it creates a major problem for federal enforcement. Missouri passed its SAPA law in 2021 and went all in. The law declared that Missouri defines the Second Amendment on its own terms. No state resources or personnel would be used to enforce federal gun laws deemed unconstitutional, and state officials couldn't assist federal agents in enforcing them. Citizens were even empowered to sue state officials who did help. That last part is huge. Missouri essentially gave enforcement authority directly to its citizens. But the Biden administration immediately sued Missouri, claiming, "You can't refuse to help us. This is obstruction." A district court agreed and struck down the law entirely. Missouri didn't back down. They appealed and requested a temporary stay to keep the law in effect during the legal battle, but the lower court denied it. Missouri then went straight to the Supreme Court for emergency relief, a rare and serious step reserved for fundamental rights cases. Here's what happened. The Supreme Court voted 8-1 to deny Missouri's request. 8 justices said, "We're not stepping in right now." The lone dissenter was Justice Clarence Thomas, the court's most consistent Second Amendment defender, who argued the case deserved review. But he was outvoted. Missouri returned to the circuit court, which held expedited hearings and again struck down the SAPA law. But here's the twist. The court admitted the law's structure might be constitutional, yet they still invalidated it because they didn't like its Second Amendment purpose. In essence, the court said, "We don't approve of your goal to protect gun rights, so the law is gone." Even more surprising, the court ruled that Missouri officials were enforcing the law simply by not assisting federal authorities. Doing nothing, they claimed, was considered the same as taking action. Missouri argued this made no sense. How can they be sued for enforcing a law when they are simply refraining from action? The court didn't care. The lawsuit began under Biden, but Trump took office midway. Everyone was watching. What would the Trump DOJ do? For months, there was no response, frustrating many. Eventually, the Trump DOJ gave a complicated answer. They said some of Missouri's SAPA law might be invalid, but the lower court overstepped with a blanket injunction. They promised that if the Supreme Court denied review and sent the case back, parts of Missouri's law could be implemented. This was significant. The Trump DOJ effectively said, "We're not opposing all of this law, there's a middle ground." They cited the anti-commandeering doctrine, which prevents the federal government from forcing states to enforce federal laws. Missouri responded, urging the Supreme Court to review the case, but 8-1, the court said no. The case returned to the lower courts. So, what does this mean for your gun rights? First, the case isn't over. The Supreme Court's emergency denial doesn't declare Missouri's law unconstitutional forever. The Trump DOJ's promise to release parts of the injunction means some provisions could take effect, likely those involving non-enforcement. Missouri officials could legally refuse to help federal agents enforce certain federal gun laws. Will this stop federal enforcement entirely? No. Agencies like the ATF can still operate, but without state cooperation or resources, which matters greatly because federal enforcement relies on local support. Now, the big questions. Will Trump's DOJ keep its promise? Which parts of the law will be allowed? Will other states follow Missouri's lead? Missouri isn't alone. States across the country are watching to see if they can pass similar SAPA laws to protect citizens' Second Amendment rights. If Missouri's law survives even partially, it sets a precedent for a wave of Second Amendment sanctuary states. The anti-gun lobby fought hard to kill Missouri's law entirely. They didn't want it narrowed, they wanted it obliterated. But now the door is slightly open, not wide, but cracked. And that's hope. This isn't just about guns, it's about federalism, the balance of power between state and federal governments. The 10th Amendment says powers not given to the federal government belong to states or the people. The Supreme Court has recognized anti-commandeering before. In Prince v. United States, 1997, the court ruled that the feds can't force local law enforcement to conduct background checks. They must enforce laws themselves. So why is Missouri's law controversial? Critics claim Missouri isn't merely refusing to help, they're actively interfering by penalizing officials who cooperate and declaring federal laws invalid. Missouri counters, we're not nullifying federal law, we're just not helping enforce it. The feds can still do their job themselves. It's a nuanced argument that walks a fine line between state sovereignty and potential obstruction. Why does this matter beyond guns? If Missouri succeeds, states could refuse to enforce any law they consider unconstitutional, restoring state sovereignty and limiting federal overreach, or potentially making some federal laws unenforceable in certain states. The stakes are huge. It's about the entire structure of American federalism. The case goes back to the Western District of Missouri. The district court will process the Trump DOJ's plan to release parts of the injunction and decide what Missouri can enforce. But remember, this judge already ruled against Missouri once. Even with the DOJ's support, Missouri must carefully implement what they're allowed. Any action could trigger new challenges. Will it eventually return to the Supreme Court? Possibly. This was only an emergency review denial, not a final ruling. If there's a final judgment, Missouri could appeal again. Justice Thomas has already shown interest and may persuade other justices at that stage. There's a path for a landmark ruling on whether states can refuse to enforce federal gun laws. So, is this a win or loss? Partially a win. The Trump DOJ will allow some enforcement. Partially a loss, the Supreme Court didn't clarify critical questions. The fight for Second Amendment rights requires constant vigilance. Missouri's actions matter. They're resisting federal overreach and using every legal tool to protect constitutional rights. That should inspire you. Ask your state legislators, will you stand up for the Second Amendment like Missouri? Will you pass laws protecting our rights? Rights are only secure if you actively defend them. The Second Amendment doesn't protect itself. Stay informed as this case develops. Watch if Trump keeps his promise. Watch if Missouri defends its law. Watch if other states follow. Contact your representatives, support organizations defending these rights, and vote for candidates who take the Second Amendment seriously. If this video helped you understand what's happening, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for updates. Comment your thoughts. Should your state pass a SAPA law? Will Trump's DOJ keep its promise? Share this with friends who care about the Second Amendment. Most people don't even know this case exists, remember. Your rights don't protect themselves. Stay informed, stay engaged, and never stop fighting for freedom.